Hello everyone, and welcome to this web seminar on promoting entrepreneurship in African universities. This seminar is going to be interactive because at the end of the day, what we aim at doing is to develop a dialogue or continue a dialogue between how to promote entrepreneurship in our higher educational institutions. And at the end of the day, I have these objectives to achieve. Whether we'll be able to stimulate the entrepreneurial mindset of staff and students in African universities. We also want to see if we will be able to encourage innovation and generate jobs among university graduates, challenge universities to incorporate entrepreneurship as part of their curriculum, and finally to promote entrepreneurship as an attractive and viable career option among African graduate students. You all agree with me that if you look at the current environment that institutions of higher education are operating, it is fraught with uncertainties, it is complex, and it is societal based. Why am I saying this? You remember that previously it is the government that was funding most higher educational institutions. And therefore, those institutions could afford to do anything and not to respond to whatever is happening to the environment. But currently, you realize that higher educational institutions are being criticized because it is alleged that they are churning out graduates that are mismatched for what industries need. This presupposes that higher educational institutions will have to rethink in terms of the way they do things, especially in terms of the way they educate graduates and in terms of the way they do their things in the various higher educational institutions. Entrepreneurship is one of the tools by which we can produce graduates that can fit what industry wants. But before we look at what entrepreneurship is, I just want to look at a study that was carried out by the World Bank on various African institutions. For instance, in 2014, they carried out a research to find out graduates who are able to find jobs after the completion of their higher educational programs. And they realized that about 50% of graduates who leave Ghanaian universities are not able to find jobs after 2 years. In addition, 20% don't find jobs after 3 years. There is a similar situation in Kenya and Mozambique. They realize that majority of graduates who come out from universities in Kenya and Mozambique also do not find work after 2 years. That is 50%, and also 20% after 3 years. So you all agree with me that when we talk of entrepreneurship, we realize that it is one of the tools. We don't want to say it is the main tool, but it is one of the tools by which we can nip this situation in the bud. Now, what do we mean by entrepreneurship? Before we look at how to promote entrepreneurship in higher educational institutions, we have to understand the concept of what entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship is all about. When we say entrepreneurship, all that we are saying is that we are identifying opportunities, evaluating them, taking advantage of them, and at the end of the day, you want to create value. And when we say creating value, what do we mean? Before we look at creating value, we are saying that when we say creating value, it can be financial value, it can be cultural value, and it can be social value. So you are not just identifying opportunities and evaluating them. At the end of the day, when you identify those opportunities, you are aiming at creating value that will be useful to the society. And of course, when we say entrepreneurship, that is what we are talking about. So you all agree with me that if we want to create value, then entrepreneurship involves a mindset change. If you don't change people's mindset, it will be very, very difficult to imbibe that entrepreneurial culture in them. Now, remember I indicated that you are creating value. Value can be created both in the private sector and in the public sector. And we are looking at entrepreneurship. It means that entrepreneurship does not only occur in various businesses, in various industries. they also occur in our higher educational institution. And you all agree with me that that is what we want to discuss today. And when we say entrepreneurship, let me also go back and say that entrepreneurship does not only happen in businesses. We have something we call intrapreneurship, and it is entrepreneurship within organization. We have social entrepreneurship, we have green entrepreneurship, we have digital entrepreneurship, we have political entrepreneurship. So you all agree with me that entrepreneurship permeates through every fiber of our human society. And if we are churning out students who are expected to come into our society to contribute their quota to the development of our various countries, then there is a need for us to encourage them to think outside the box. Now, when we say entrepreneurship, remember I said that you identify, you evaluate opportunities, and at the end of the day, you take advantage of them and you want to create value. It means that it is a process. The whole entrepreneurship concept is a process. And the process begins with identifying opportunities. And later, when we come to look at how to promote entrepreneurship, we are going to see how we can develop the mindset and skills of our students so that they will be able to identify opportunities. Because when we say identifying opportunities, it is not everybody who can be able to identify opportunities. You need people with an unusual foresight, people who have tolerance for ambiguity. They are the people who will be able to identify opportunities. So we are saying that when we talk about entrepreneurship, we are expecting people to identify opportunities, look for resources, and try to bring those resources together so that at the end of the day, they will be able to create value. And you will see that this is in consonance with what the European Union recently carried out a research. And they came out with 3 main entrepreneurial competencies. And the first one, they were talking about ideas and opportunities. The second one, they were looking at resources. And the third one, they were looking at action. So they are saying that you get ideas, you put them into action by using resources. And usually when we talk of entrepreneurship, when we say you are using resources, it doesn't mean that you always have to use your own resources. Usually we say that entrepreneurs use other people's resources. So when we want to develop the entrepreneurial mindset of students, all that we are saying is that we help them identify opportunities, help them identify resources, and at the end of the day, when they are able to identify those resources, they put them into action. So we've looked at the current environment within which our higher educational institutions are operating. We've indicated that entrepreneurship is one of the tools by which we can surmount the challenges that we face in terms of the unemployment and in terms of the complexity and uncertainties in our environment. So you realize that we are saying that when we want to incorporate entrepreneurship into our higher educational institution, we are referring to entrepreneurship education. So what do we mean by entrepreneurship education? When we say entrepreneurship education, we are looking at education that helps individuals to be able to turn ideas into action. That is what the Commission for Communication defined entrepreneurship education in 2006. And with their definition, you can see that entrepreneurship education includes creativity, it includes innovation, it includes risk-taking, as well as the ability to plan and manage projects. UNESCO, on the other hand, defined entrepreneurship education to be made up of a lot of experiences. So they are not looking at only education that helps the individual to be able to be creative, but they also look at the type of education that is related to experiences. And when we say experiences, usually when we say people have experience, we are looking at only the classroom experience. No, we are not looking at only the classroom experience. We are even looking at the experiences people go through within the society. And later, when we come to look at the entrepreneurship ecosystem, we are going to talk about some of the stakeholders and how they can help individuals. And in this instance, we are talking about higher institutions to go through some of these experiences. So now we ask ourselves, if entrepreneurship education is to help people to be creative, help people to plan, help people to be problem solvers, help people to be risk takers, then why do we need this type of education in African higher institutions. You realize that entrepreneurship education is a process. And when we talk of education, we are looking at the relatively permanent change in an individual as a result of experience. So you realize that the individual goes through various processes in our higher education. And therefore, these institutions are supposed to be able to grow and nurture the entrepreneurial talent and the entrepreneurial spirit in students. So entrepreneurship education is very, very important. And it is one of the ways by which we even judge universities, the quality of the education. And when we say entrepreneurship education, mind you, we are not looking at only the students. We are even looking at the lecturers and the professors. Later, when we come to look at the component, we will say that even the lecturers and the professors, even higher top management, when they are coming out with strategies, there's the need for them to be entrepreneurial in everything they do. So we are saying that it is important because in this current dispensation, if you say you want to be able to compete and stay above water in the higher, in this current global environment, there is a need for you to be entrepreneurial. It is very, very critical in this 21st century. So we are saying that quality education is very important. Entrepreneurship is one of them, and we are saying that we can't succeed if we don't have entrepreneurship education in our institutions. And finally, we are saying that it also enables individuals. And when I say individuals, I'm not looking at only students. I'm looking at students and staff and everybody to be able to nurture their personal development, to actively contribute to social development or enter the job market as employees or as self-employed, start up a business, or even if they have a business already, to be able to scale up those businesses. So you realize that entrepreneurship education is very, very important in our higher educational institutions. Now you realize that I've looked at entrepreneurship in general, how to identify, evaluate opportunities, create value. And I indicated that the value can be financial, it can be social, it can be cultural. And we also look at what we mean by entrepreneurship education. And we are saying that it is a process. So it doesn't mean that when someone even leaves the university after going through that type of education, then entrepreneurship education ends for him or her. Now we have the philosophy we call lifelong learning. You have to learn until you die. So you realize that it is very, very important. Now, what are the elements of an entrepreneurship education? Usually when we say entrepreneurship education, people will be thinking that students will have to necessarily start their own businesses. No. Even if you don't start your own business and you are employed in an organization, you should be entrepreneurial. You identify, it can be in terms of a process. Maybe for the banking hall, you see the processes customers go through, and you realize that the process is cumbersome. And you may decide that, why won't I come out with a process that will make things shorter, and at the end of the day, the customers will be happy. All those things are examples of entrepreneurship and education. So the elements of entrepreneurship education is that it involves developing people's ability to have that intuitive decision making. Remember, I indicated that entrepreneurs are people who have the unusual foresight. They see things others don't see. And even if they see those things and they want to make the decisions, they try to calculate the risk. Entrepreneurs are risk takers. So when we say calculation of risk, it doesn't mean that you see a big hole and you just jump in. You have to calculate, how am I going to jump in such a way that I'm not going to fall into the hole? And that is what we expect an entrepreneurship education to contain. Then also, we want to see the capacity to make things happen. Usually when we take students through entrepreneurship or entrepreneurship education, we want them to know that they have the ability to make things happen. For instance, I've had the opportunity of teaching students entrepreneurship and new venture creation. And the way I teach the course is in such a way that when I give them the various concepts and tools, I make them identify an opportunity, evaluate the opportunity, and try and see if they can work with that opportunity for 1 month. And after 1 month, they are invited back into the classroom to come and present to us whatever they were able to do. And it will interest you to know that sometimes the students will even tell themselves that they never knew they will be able to do A, B, C, D until they were challenged to take up that entrepreneurial mindset. So one of the elements is to make people know that they have the capacity to make things happen. And you also realize that when we say entrepreneurship education, when we come to look at the ecosystem, it involves networking. Because, for instance, if, let's assume, a student decides to start a business, and the person wants money or finances to start the business, of course, he or she will have to go to the bank. There are venture capital, there are organizations that are prepared to support people who want to start businesses. And you realize that it boils down to the fact that there should be contacts and connections. If you don't have contacts and connections, then it will be difficult for you to survive in this global world. And of course, we have initiative taking, which is one of the elements. Then opportunity identification. Then we also have creative problem solving. You cannot be entrepreneurial if you are not creative, because there are various ways of doing things, and if you are not creative, at the end of the day, if you do the same thing the way you've been doing 20 years ago, you realize that you are going to flop. Then, of course, there should be strategic thinking. And finally, there should be self-efficacy. And when I say self-efficacy, the person should believe in him or herself that I'll be able to do A, B, C, D. Remember, you want to stimulate the entrepreneurial mindset in students. Now, let us look at some of the ways by which we can promote entrepreneurial education in our various institutions. Before we look at how to promote entrepreneurial education, I want us to know that before you promote entrepreneurial education, you have to look at the entrepreneurial ecosystem, because we are looking at entrepreneurship in higher education. And you realize that if you look at the ecosystem, higher education is just one of them. Our universities and our polytechnics, they are just one of the ecosystems. For instance, you have governments. If governments do not create an enabling environment for people to develop and nurture their ideas, the university can do whatever they want to do in developing the mindset of students, but at the end of the day, they are not going to change the way or their attitude in terms of the way they do things. So you realize that governments are very, very important. Then, of course, we have private businesses, private organizations. When we teach students, we are expecting that sometimes they'll be able to go out there to have the practical feel of whatever they've been taught in class. And therefore, if we don't collaborate with industry, I know, for instance, AAU is interested in industry, academia collaboration, and that is what we are even championing at the University of Cape Coast, where now we have about 50 industry partners. We send students there for internship. Sometimes we invite some of them as guest speakers. Sometimes when we are even developing or revising our curriculum, we invite them to come and share their input, so that at the end of the day, when we churn out students, we come out with students who have the holistic development, not in terms of the knowledge, but in terms of what actually happens in the world out there. So when we talk of the ecosystem, we are not looking at only government. We are looking at private organizations, we are looking at public organizations, we are looking at NGOs, we are looking at district assemblies, we are even looking at the media. How is the media even promoting entrepreneurship education? And we are also looking at funding sources. So, for instance, if a student goes through entrepreneurship education and at the end of the day he or she decides that, okay, I want to start a business, is there a funding source available for him or her? I've had students who have come out with bright business ideas, and at the end of the day, it's even difficult for us to get funding for them. Although now we have a business plan competition, which is being sponsored by a German financial institution, and another by GIZ, which is also another German organization. So when we organize a business plan competition, that is those who want to start businesses after going through the entrepreneurship education, they are prepared to fund them. But the funding will end in 2018, and we have to ask ourselves, even when it ends, how do we move on from there? So we talk about the funding sources, very, very important. Then we also talk about the community. the community within which the higher educational institutions operate. All those things, or all those institutions, are part of the ecosystem of entrepreneurship. So when we want to promote entrepreneurship education in higher educational institutions, we don't only have to focus on only the institutions, but we have to look at the various stakeholders or the various actors whose activity will impact on us developing the entrepreneurial mindset of students. So what are some of the ways by which we can promote entrepreneurship in higher educational institutions? And I am looking at various activities. They are not prescriptive. Remember, I said that I'm saying that I'm just listing them and discussing them, so that at the end of the day, I'm going to promote or stimulate dialogue, and we'll see how we can all move our higher educational institutions forward. So the first item I have here is building entrepreneurship education into the various strategic plans of our higher educational institutions. We know that every institution has got a strategic plan that spells out the vision, the mission, the core values of that institution. And therefore, I'm indicating, or I'm suggesting, that when we want to build or promote entrepreneurship education, there is the need for us to put that type of education, that is education for people's personal development, business development, we put that as part of our strategic plan. So that at the end of the day, when we pick our strategic plan and we look at our action plans, entrepreneurship education is incorporated in there. Then secondly, to be able to promote that, we need top management support. And when I say top management support, I'm looking at those people at the helm of affairs in the various higher educational institutions. So for instance, we have the vice chancellors, we have the senate, some people call them senate, others call them academic board, we have the heads of department, we have the deans. They are the people who manage activities in the various institutions of higher learning. And we have to know that at the end of the day, if they don't even have that entrepreneurial attitude or entrepreneurial mindset, they are not going to support whatever happens down there. And therefore, there is a need for us to also train them. They have to go through a type of training program that will stimulate their entrepreneurial mindset, and that will also help them develop an entrepreneurial attitude. For instance, I'll be using my university as an example because I teach there, and we've started a lot of things. For instance, my vice chancellor is into entrepreneurship and entrepreneurship education. And therefore, when we decided to introduce a university-wide entrepreneurship course for everybody in the university, and we sent it to the academic board, he was the first person to encourage us and champion it, so that at the end of the day, now we have a university entrepreneurship, wide entrepreneurship course for everybody. Now we've also established a business incubator, and that incubator is to help people nurture and develop their ideas. Although it is on pilot basis, we have 9 businesses who are operating in the incubator now. And at the end of the day, we are expecting that when we are able to get maybe funding, we'll build up a big incubator so that we'll be able to incorporate or house a lot of businesses in that incubator. So you realize that if you don't get, and all these things, we had the support of top management, especially the vice chancellor, who was always championing entrepreneurship education. So I've spoken about the strategy, I've spoken about top management support. The next thing is for us to look at the curriculum. And when I say the curriculum, of course, we know that in every institutions of higher learning, we have programs, we have courses, and in those courses, we have various activities the lecturers want to teach. And when we talk of the curriculum, all that we are saying is that entrepreneurship education can be incorporated in every curriculum, not only in business curriculum, but also in sciences, in the performing arts, visual arts, every discipline or any subject area in the university, you can incorporate entrepreneurship education. Because remember, at the end of the day, you want to churn out graduates who will be able to perform creditably at the world of work. So we should incorporate it in there. Now, when I mention curriculum, we are trying to see whether it is only the content. We are not looking at only the content, we are even looking at the mode of delivery. Because if you have issues like strategic thinking, creativity, problem solving in the curriculum, and you don't have a particular way of delivery, At the end of the day, it will be in the curriculum, but you are not able to have any desired impact on the students. So when we talk of curriculum, we are not looking at only the content, but we are also looking at the mode of delivery. Those who are teaching the various subject areas, that includes entrepreneurship. How do they develop, or how do they show their pedagogical strategies in such a way that at the end of the day, students will be able to develop those skills? For instance, now we have something we call problem-based learning, which is aimed at helping students to be critical thinkers, to be problem solvers in the community within which they live. Now we have something we call practice-oriented teaching. We have something we call tandem teaching. We have something we call experiential learning. All these terms I'm using is just to let you know that now the emphasis is not only on theory, but you have to fuse in theory with the practical, so that at the end of the day, by the time the student leaves the university, he or she has got the skills to be able to operate in the world of work. Then of course we need the capacity building. The professors and the lecturers, the mode and method of teaching. You know, when I started teaching, it was just, we were not even use PowerPoint presentation. You just go to the class, read the thing, read the notes, and at the end of the day, you leave. But now, through capacity building, we've all realized that the theory thing is gone. There is a need for you to infuse the practice aspect. But so it means that if you don't develop the capacity of the lecturers, or the teachers, or those who are going to help with this entrepreneurship education, at the end of the day, they will be teaching the same way they were teaching 20 years ago, and you will not be able to achieve the desired impact. Then also we have to look at the infrastructure. When we talk of entrepreneurship education in higher educational institutions, it is not only even the classroom. It is not only even the practice-oriented teaching. Sometimes you may need infrastructure. For instance, I gave you the example that now we have a business incubator. Other institutions have even got technology parks where people with business ideas are housed in those technology parks. And even those who have started businesses, they are housed in those technology parks, so that at the end of the day, they get advice as to how they can grow and nurture those businesses. So we need infrastructure to be able to do that. Then also we have to look at our funding sources. For instance, if you want to build an incubator or you want to establish a technology park, it needs money. Where are you going to get the money to be able to do that? So to be able to promote entrepreneurship education, we need various funding sources. Or for instance, if you are encouraging students to start businesses and they have the business idea and they don't have the various sources of funds, at the end of the day, how do they start the businesses? We have had, like I said earlier, students coming out with various business opportunities, but at the end of the day, they are not able to get funding for that. So what we've done at the University of Cape Coast, and it is a proposal that has been put forward by our Department of Economics, is that they want to encourage students to start saving. So they are trying to see if they can establish a credit union. You know, we have credit union for staff members, and therefore if you want money to be able, and of course the interest rate is very low. So I remember some 20 years ago when I wanted to start a business, that is where I borrowed money. So we have decided that now let us establish a credit union for students. So they start saving immediately. They enter the University of Cape Coast. It is something, a proposal that is on the table, so that at the end of the day, if they finish and they want money to do something, they will be able to go to that credit union to borrow money for those type of businesses they want to start. And you all agree with me that I teach entrepreneurship. I am an entrepreneur myself, and I tell students that I will not advise you to start a business and go for a bank loan, because the interest rate is about 20-30%. By the time you finish paying the interest, you will be 100 years old, and the bank will still be chasing you for their money. So these are some of the ways that when we say funding sources, these are just examples of some of the ways by which we can get funding for entrepreneurship. And the example I gave, you realize that it is related to only starting a business, but even developing the mindset, building the capacity of the teachers, all those things involve money, and therefore we all have to look at the funding sources. Then one thing I've also realized is that I will not say most, but some of the institutions I know do not have an IPR policy, intellectual property right policy. When we say entrepreneurship, Remember, I said that we are not looking at only entrepreneurship from the student's angle. We are also looking at entrepreneurship in terms of staff. So let's assume if a professor comes up with an invention and we don't have this IPR policy, how would they make sure that they are able to patent their invention so that nobody will copy? Because if we are able to patent it, the university is going to generate revenue for that. The lecturer is also going to generate revenue for that. And at the end of the day, we also put up the image of the university out there for people to know what we are doing. So there is a need for us to also get intellectual property right policy in our various institutions. Then also we have to look at mentoring and coaching. When you say entrepreneurial mindset, one of the things you have to realize is that people just don't, taking them through education, then they say, okay, now I've gone through education, I've developed the entrepreneurial mindset. No, there is a need for them to be mentored and coached by their peers, by their subordinates, by supervisors, and that is one thing we also have to establish. And I'm working on a project with a German institution and Bonn-Rhein-Sieg University of Applied Sciences and the University of Nairobi, and that is one of the things we are doing. When we encourage people and they develop the entrepreneurial mindset, we don't leave them there. For instance, if they want to establish a business, we have mentors and coaches. And that is where the industry-academia collaboration is very, very important. So we identify captains in industry that we have MOUs with who will be able to mentor and coach these students. And we don't only coach them or mentor them when it comes to starting businesses. We even mentor and coach them as to how they develop leadership skills to be able to operate effectively and efficiently in the society. So these are some of the ways by which we can develop the entrepreneurial mindset of students. And before maybe I invite questions and comments and contributions from the audience, one thing I also want to emphasize is that there is a need for us to look at building linkages. And when I say linkages, it is not only with industry. We also have to build linkages with the community. Because when you look at the entrepreneurship ecosystem, you realize that the community within which we live or the community within which we operate is part of the ecosystem. And therefore, how do we make sure that we churn out students who will be able to help solve some of the problems we face in the society? We'll be able to do that if we are able to build linkages with the various NGOs, the various associations, and the various people who matter in the society. Then also, when we talk of society, we are also saying that we don't only use them because we want to solve their problems, but when it comes to field visits, when it comes to excursions, when it comes to case studies, and when it comes to role models in the area of entrepreneurship, we also go to the community and see if we can source for some of those activities within those communities. Then finally, I want to say that when we say entrepreneurship, it is not only something that can be taught in our higher educational institutions. So we can see entrepreneurship as a core curricular activity. For instance, I learned entrepreneurship in the university, my master's, my PhD, I did entrepreneurship. But I will tell you that I've been able to develop most of my skills outside the university through training program, through internship with industry, through mentoring and coaching, and through relationship with some of the community organizations. So all that I'm saying is that when we say promoting entrepreneurship in higher educational institutions, we should not only look at entrepreneurship there, because when you look at the ecosystem, there is a need for us to operate outside also the higher educational environment, and that is the community we are talking about. So it means that we can't only learn entrepreneurship education only in the classroom. For instance, whatever we are doing now, the interaction when we finish, the questions, the answers, the dialogue, it is also part of entrepreneurial education. Sometimes someone can even do a presentation, upload it on the social networks. People can look at it from YouTube. There can be exchanges of ideas on Twitter, Facebook, WhatsApp, all Snapchat, all those type of social media. We can also have entrepreneurship education on some of them. And even the radio, you can use the radio to propagate entrepreneurship education. So all that I'm saying is that entrepreneurship education can not only be learned in a higher educational institution, we can also add the other sources where we can get entrepreneurship education. So what is my conclusion? Remember, when I started, I indicated that this is going to be interactive, and I'm not going to say I'm going to give you a prescription in terms of how it should be done, because remember, African institutions, they differ in terms of the type of governance, in terms of the context within which they operate. So we can't say that one size fits all. We will look at the various concepts, the general concepts, and try to see whether we can adapt them to the context within which we are operating. So at the end of the day, we are saying that entrepreneurship education is not only the responsibility of higher educational institutions. It is the responsibility of government, it is the responsibility of policymakers, students, lecturers, industry, top management. It is the responsibilities of all stakeholders in the society if we want to be able to churn out students or develop students who have the creative skills, who have the problem-solving skills, who have the ability to take risks, who are able to see things others don't see, and who will be able to operate in this 21st century of ours, where there is competition, where there is massification, and where there is dwindling funds from government in terms of money and resources to manage the universities. So in conclusion, entrepreneurship education runs through every human sphere, not only in our universities, in our homes, in our businesses, in our communities, and therefore it should be something that should be championed by higher educational institutions and also other stakeholders outside the higher educational institution environment. Thank you very much for listening to me. Of course, I have the references at the end of the slide. You can look at the references, and when you go on the net and when you go on YouTube, there are a lot of resources you can look at so that you'll be able to enrich your ideas as to how to promote education, entrepreneurship education in our higher educational institutions in Africa. Thank you very much for your attention.